engine is installed. Let's go drive.
Hey guys, welcome back to the fourth episode of the GTR build. A little windy here today, but as you probably saw in that first clip that I opened the video with, we got the old rear end out. Now that is an S14 subframe. The previous owner Dylan installed. I really don't know why, because I know a lot of people say S14 is better because it deletes HICUS and it is wider. But I'm just going back to the normal R34 subframe. Also because I believe the diff in there is a 6-bolt drive shaft thing, and this is a 4-bolt, which is for the drive shaft I have. Not that that's really an issue. I could easily just swap diffs. They're both Nissan diffs, so I'm sure they would swap over. But I'm just using this because, I don't know, it's the only difference is really the coilover mounts on the R34 are very, very different. They're kind of like a C shape that goes over with a bolt, while the S14 ones are just like a circle that slides on a shaft and then there's a bolt. So it's actually different, so you can't actually use R34 coils on an S14 rear end or S14 coils on an R34 rear end. But other than that, it does still have HICUS. I will be deleting that later. I'm pretty sure it actually has HICUS lock inside the boots. There's like these little things, collars that go in there to lock it from steering left or right. And because the whole front clip, it had this little like module, electronic module. I'm not sure where it is. It's probably lost in that mess of wires. But it said a Tomy HICUS 3-way lock. And I Googled what that is. It's like a $120 part that just locks the HICUS from moving. So it's the same thing as deleting it. But anyways, I'm about ready to move this in. Now I had to, what they did with the old brake lines was they actually just cut them off of the clip instead of undoing the nuts. And yeah, so I actually had to cut off the brake line off of the caliper to get the nut off the caliper because they were absolutely stripping. And I would most likely order for about $100 full stainless brake lines for all 4 corners. Now another thing I realized is that the master cylinder, the brake master cylinder, because I took it out of that car, I can use the booster, but the master cylinder has to be swapped to a non-ABS one because the ABS one only has 2 ports to go to the ABS, and a real one has to have 2 ports for the front 2 wheels and then 1 port for the rear. So apparently I can use like a Nissan Pathfinder one or something like that. But anyways, I'm gonna get the rear end in. It literally took me like 5 minutes to get the old rear end out, so getting the new one on shouldn't be too bad. And then I did already take off the Gretty coilovers. Now I am gonna be sticking with those. I have not adjusted these tension rods or the upper control arms or anything. I just wanna see how they're set with how much camber they have. And the height on those coilovers is set to how it was on the sedan, R34 sedan, when they were up before it was crashed and cut in half like that. So I'm just curious to see how the suspension setup is, like in Japan. Like, I don't know, like what this car was used for, but like even the toe arms, you probably can't see it, it's behind the lower control arm, but the toe arms even have bump steer correction on them, which is a nice feature because a lot of people don't do bump steer correction when they lower a car. So I don't know, I'm just curious to see how it's set up. I mean, after that I'll probably start tinkering with the suspension myself, but yeah, gonna get the rear subframe in, and then hopefully later today get that whole motor and trans in, just because I work for the next 2 days, and it's a really big milestone to get the motor and trans just mounted up. Like, just get the subframe bolted in there, get the trans mount bolted in, that's it. That's all I really want to finish at today, because it's a huge milestone, you know, to go from the beginning of last week of having done nothing to essentially having the rear end and the whole motor trans front end in the shell. And then from there I can do it all by myself. I can wire it all of it myself. I can run the fuel lines myself. that's not an issue. It's just I just do need help. Hopefully a friend will come over later today. I'm still not sure if he is, to help me move that and somehow get that under the car, because it's definitely going to be the biggest challenge, because I hate relying on others with builds. Because if you haven't noticed, everything I build I kind of literally build by myself. Like, I hate relying on other people, because then it stops me from being, you know, progressing on the build, because I have to wait for somebody to come over and do this, and then sometimes they can come over, etc., etc. And obviously I'm not going to drop it off at a shop and pay someone. So anyways, enough talking. I'm gonna get to work now. Hey, so this is about 2 days later now. I was about to go and edit the video, but then I realized we never took an outro. The last clip was actually us putting this in 2 days ago. So I did have my friend Shane come over because the engine was literally right there, and just to drag it like this 10 feet was insanely hard. I kind of dug up all the rocks, so it would be dragging on dirt more than rocks. The subframe is a little bit scratched up, but it's not really a big deal. But I even tried to use the BMW bike to tow it a little bit at one point, but it didn't really work. There wasn't really much to hook by, but we left off that night having a little bit of an issue with trying to get the subframe bolts bolted in, because one side the 2 bolts would go into the studs and the other side would not go on. It was like a 1/4 inch off. And then come to realize I basically had to lower it all, which I did the next day, and I had to jack it up at the same time and get all 4 bolts in kind of at the same time with a little bit of hammering, but I got it. So all last night I worked without really filming anything. So the subframe is fully bolted up, the trans mount in the back is bolted up, the tension rod brackets are bolted up here. If you see that wetness, that's actually power steering fluid from the reservoir being tilted forward and leaking while out of the car. The tension rods are bolted on, the coilovers are bolted on, the upper control arms are bolted on, and yeah, I mean, it's the suspension's essentially, I can like put it down on the ground right now without needing anything, and the engine, transmission, suspension is all in and everything. The steering is still not hooked up because I'm still trying to figure out how to do that, but it's not really a concern too much right now. But I just have to get that shaft right here into I have to get this shaft into this kind of piece right here, but it's kind of weird because obviously it's too long, so I don't know how to exactly do that, but I'll figure that out. It's not too bad. But I just wanted to end the video here before I start doing the final, well, not really the final video, but the final video for that leads to the motor being started up, and maybe leads to it being driven, because once it starts up there's really not much more besides the drive shaft, which I can put in pretty quickly right now, and brakes. Brakes is the really big one because I have to order braided lines for all 4 corners, and I have to get a special master cylinder that's non-ABS, as I explained. So now I'm already starting to put everything together. I have the fuel lines out of that front clip about to go in there, because fuel lines are the, you know, kind of first thing you do. And then I'll just start transferring the harnesses over. The harnesses from this, the engine harness, is going to have to go through that hole, and that's basically what the ECU connects to. And then the main harness that I never actually got to pull out of that, which is actually the it's the main, I don't know, the main harness, I guess, what it would be called. There's also a dash harness that goes across. It was raining a bit one of the nights, so I had to just cover it. Actually, the night that we were installing the motor, but that's the main one, because this is the main fuse box, which goes through that. So I'm gonna have to push all of this manually through and pull the fuse box that sits in here out to with the dash harness, and just basically put it all back in there. Then I have to go get a battery, which a lot of people say the Prius battery works pretty well, because that's what the R32 has. And this already has everything to convert it to the rear battery. It's already in, as you can see that power cable right there, that red line.